The transfer portal is in full swing, and there are plenty more names that will be entering very soon. We're going to take a quick look, get a little update on the transfer portal, look at some of the top players. Michigan State wide receiver Nick Marsh is at the top right now, and if you look back to some of the previous classes, his rating would show you kind of what kind of player you're getting. A guy with good size, has the ability to stretch the field vertically, and someone who could be an instant impact player wherever he lands. Has a number of potential landing spots, and again, a guy who's going to be an instant impact type player. Boo Carter, we've talked about him quite a bit for the transfer portal, Tennessee Volunteers. A good defensive back to be able to slot into whether it's corner, nickelback. He also has good abilities as a returner. So that's another name to keep an eye on. TCU actually already has a commit from offensive tackle Noah McKinney from Oklahoma State. We kind of expect some of these teams that fired their coaches, Michigan State and Oklahoma State being two of them, to hit the portal. Noah McKinney's a solid player, whether he plays inside or outside. TCU is getting a pretty good offensive lineman there. Dylan Edwards, big name there, explosive ability. Obviously couldn't stay healthy at Kansas State. Daniel Harris and Jarek Gibson coming from the SEC from Georgia and Texas, respectively. I think Harris expected to be a little bit more part of Georgia's rotation in the secondary. Jarek Gibson has shown his flashes as a good running back, so he could be an instant impact player there. We've seen a little bit of what he could do for Texas, but Texas rushing attack hasn't been great. Michael Smith, a tight end from South Carolina. Underrated one, Ben Murawski from UConn, with Jim Mora going to Colorado State. Maybe he follows him there. That's another thing to keep an eye on. Some of these coaches that are leaving, a lot of these guys that transfer are probably going to follow them there. Darren Conley from Ball State, underrated defensive lineman there. Michael Short, similar for Virginia Tech linebacker with the changes there. You also have some guys that are going to fly under the radar, whether that's Dakota Fields, talented player from Oregon, but there I think are some issues with what we've seen his exit look like, but we'll see what happens there. Talented player for sure. Then a guy like Bradley Jones, when you look at where he comes from, smaller school, Jarrell Condi as well, going to Kansas from Grand Valley. You're looking at smaller school guys that could have bigger impact. Israel Polk, another guy from Akron, very talented wide receiver, didn't have the greatest numbers, but when you're looking at the relative factors that factor into that, there's a reason why. Another Oregon cornerback, Jalil Florence. At one point, I thought Jalil Florence was going to be a big time player for the Ducks, but when you recruit like Dan Lanning does, there's plenty of competition. I think that whoever gets him gets an instant starter for that secondary. Florence is a guy with plenty of talent. Then you start getting into some of these lower, not lower rated guys, but not the guys that are going to be potential starters, maybe those rotational players, depth pieces. You have plenty of interesting names. Mekhi Frazier could be really good. I think that Ezra Christensen flies under the radar as a defensive lineman. You're also looking at, I think, some of these group of five players that you don't necessarily know is where teams can find great value. So Najee Cox, Jet Carpenter, Thomas Davis from App State. I really liked him coming into the season. I think that he could be a solid piece for anybody that wants to get him. Mekhi Jackson, former App State transfer and at Indiana, got caught in a loaded and a deep wide receiver room at Indiana. He is someone who could be really fun as well. So when you're looking at the number of talented players you have, there's a good group in here right now. We'll try to update this as the weeks go on. There's going to be a lot of changes, a lot of things to look at. Today, we're just looking at the top ones. In the future, we'll go look at the more recent ones. We'll keep everything up and day by day. But there are plenty of bigger names to keep an eye on near the top of the list. But you're also seeing some of these smaller school guys are going to get opportunities as well. So you look at guys like Tristan Gardner, Dairy Rogers from Northern Illinois. You have FCS guys that are transferring as well that could make a big time impact and actually might have a bigger impact than some of these Power 4 transfers. So the transfer portal is going to have very interesting opportunities for those guys. But let's take a look at the more recent transfers within the last few days. Transfer portal is going to have plenty of players enter when coaches get fired. So a guy like Rayon Strader, the former Miami, Ohio transfer who went to Auburn, there are a lot of people that are excited about his abilities. He is someone that could find a solid home there. Sam McCall is a name I think a lot of people recognize. That's a guy who came from Florida State, goes to Georgia State. Things don't work out, probably going to the FCS route, maybe another group of 5. Michael Allen, former NC State transfer. Dylan Lonergan is a name to keep an eye on. I think that he will have plenty of Power 4 opportunities coming out of Boston College. He actually did start and had multiple 300-yard games for the Eagles. He is someone that could, I think, be really solid. Dorian Royal, underrated name coming out of Georgia State. Jackson Potter, quarterback from Washington State, actually started for the Cougars this year before losing the spot to Zevi Eckhouse. When you're looking at some of these other names to keep an eye on, you do have plenty of Georgia State transfers. As you can see, Joquist Smith, I think, is an underrated player there for Temple. I think that he could find a solid landing spot. Kamari House, that is a big time linebacker. I'm not sure what he's going to get graded at, but he will be near the top once 24/7 gets to him. He is someone that's going to have lots of opportunities. It just comes down to when and where he will land. You also have a great name in DIC Hopkins. I'm surprised at his entrance. I thought that he could be a solid player for Georgia State, but obviously didn't work out. Other names that we can look at, there's plenty of names, like I said, that are going in. Xavion Hardy for South Carolina, Drew Dickey coming from Vanderbilt, Quay Moss from Kansas State. These are all guys that just didn't work out at their spots, but there was a lot of excitement about them coming into the season of what they could do. And again, when you're looking at the dates, there's plenty of guys that are already committed, guys that are entering the transfer portal. So this is going to be pretty quick. Elijah McKenzie is one who just committed to Liberty. That is a very interesting player to watch. The Flames definitely need some help on that side of the ball, so he could be a big time player there. You also have other players coming from App State. We talked about them and their turnover. You're seeing a string here of guys that are leaving App State for other places. You're going to see some names that you recognize, and you're going to see some names that are maybe new. So get acquainted with some of these players because they could be some of the big names that help whatever school you're following. Davion Crouch is another linebacker to keep an eye on. Boston College didn't have the best year, so you can kind of expect these guys to hit the transfer portal, try to find somewhere else to go. And Davion Crouch is someone that could have a potential impact. Cole Martin, same thing. Thought he could be a solid piece for UCLA's defense for their secondary, but ultimately did not turn out. We'll go a little bit longer and see who else has gone in. Again, there's so much happening with the transfer portal, and you can see just the number of names. Jaden Burnett, that's a big time name for the Tulsa Golden Hurricane, someone who is going to make an impact at another school, whether that's at a Power 4 level or somewhere else. I think Jaden Burnett is going to be a huge addition for someone else. We've seen Dante Lee already, Bradley Jones. Those are guys that I think will be solid for wherever they land. Dante Lee was in a pretty talented Liberty wide receiver group, so that's another name to keep an eye on. But if you're looking for talent, it's definitely going to be there. Now, the big names probably aren't going to be as a long of a list, but there are definitely names that can help you build out your roster, build depth, and that's really exciting. So that's the transfer portal update for today. We'll probably look at it again next week to look at who has entered since then and talk about those players as well. Let me know who your favorite player is in the transfer portal, who you want to see your school get. Plenty of names to get, plenty of names to keep an eye on. And as always, subscribe to the channel. We'll see you in the next video.